Kia ora koutou. Welcome everybody to the first of the presentation sessions in this NZRSE 2023. My name is Brent Martin. I'm pleased to be your chair for this session. And in this session, we are going to have three talks in the general area of principles of data and software design and management in a research setting. Each of these talks will be 15 minutes plus 5 minutes for questions. If you have a question you'd like to be asked of the presenter, please type it into the live Q&A and then we'll go through those with the presenter at the end of their talk. So now, without further ado, I'm delighted to announce the first of our speakers, Eryn Kwon, who will speak to us about using FAIR and CARE in medical imaging. Thank you, Eryn.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ka whakapapa au ki South Korea, engari I tipu ai au ki te whenua o Aotearoa. Ko Tairāwhiti te wāhi kāinga, he paiwai rangahau matua au I Mātai Medical Research Institute. Ko Eryn tōku ingoa, tēnā tātou katoa. Hi, I'm Eryn from Mātai. I come from biomedical engineering background and have been working in medical imaging field for the past few years at Mātai. For those who have not heard about us, Mātai is a regional medical research center situated in Tairāwhiti, Gisborne. In Gisborne, we have a lot of interesting facts where a number of MRI machines outnumber traffic lights 2-1, and planes give way to trains. We also have a good representation of New Zealand population, 50% being Maori and 50% non-Maori roughly. But unfortunately, due to the regional location, we experience inequity and reduced access to healthcare and education, making our placement unique and gives us a slightly different perspective and advantages. Our placement enables us to connect with data owners directly, which provides a great learning opportunity and multiple ways to form connection for research. We have been generating a lot of imaging data for research since our establishment in 2020. For who are not familiar with imaging research, the three stages of imaging research is firstly the data collection, where image is collected. For example, there is an MRI image shown, and those images needs to be processed, where quantification and data extractions of the raw data happen. And the third stage is data analysis, where the data analysis is performed on the quantified results to answer research questions. There is no disagreement that research needs to be fair and CARE, hopefully, but the exact implementation of the principles are not as standardized and established from field to field. So how is FAIR and CARE principles applied in imaging research currently? From my understanding, there are some things working well and some that needs improvements. First, for FAIR principles, the MRI data is relatively findable. The acquisition metadata and raw data format are almost a universal global standard used across clinical and research environment. However, once generated, image processing metadata might be hard to attach to the data and be findable. MRI can be made accessible readily. Many open MRI databases available overseas, such as UK Biobank or ADNI, representing their own local population. To make this raw data useful, processing needs to be performed, the second step, and many processing pipelines are freely shared on GitHubs, etc. However, these pipelines have multiple parameters to tune for, and it requires years of training to find a good one and use it right. The MRIs technically can be interoperable. The unified formats such as DICOM for the MRI particularly allows good interoperation, and lots of other medical imaging modalities have unified formats. However, this is not as straightforward as it seems, as there is a lack of ground truth. I will elaborate on this on the next slide. And lastly, the imaging data can be reusable. The available databases have rich data set, and multiple research can be performed on the same data set. However, harmonizing own local data to existing data set is a big challenge. The problems for imaging research, to be fair, arise mostly from the data collection and processing, in my view. And one of the main hindrances to interoperability is that each MRI machine can be different, as well as multiple acquisition settings are available, even within a known methodology, such as T1 weighted. For example, the MRI data collected from 3 different sites can have differences, shown on the top, due to the machine and protocol changes. Harmonization is needed to reduce these systematic differences so the data is truly interoperable. After the harmonization data is shown down at the bottom. This process is even more difficult as there are no ground truth in the MRI data and rigorous calibration between sites and machines are needed. By ground truth, I mean the intensity of a tissue can change depending on the imaging sequences and subsettings easily, even for a fixed tissue. In contrast, other fields of research are less prone to this kind of a problem. For example, in genetics research, the nucleotide bases, AGCTs, are consistent between machines and sites. Doesn't really matter who analyzes them. In addition to the machine differences, humans add to the problem. We're not all the same, which is good, but unfortunate for the imaging research. Between individuals and even within an individual, there are changes over time as we develop and age. This requires a large data set to obtain a meaningful research outcome that can apply to population. However, no such database exists in New Zealand to represent our local typical population at the moment. For the data to be truly usable in imaging research, detailed health metadata needs to be made available beyond the routine age, sex, and ethnicity. Any demographic or medical information that can confound imaging outcomes will be needed to reuse data properly. But open repositories have limited metadata attached beyond the initial study design focus. Without a common and standardized data collection methods, extra care is needed when reusing pre-existing data from multiple databases. So let's look at care principle application in imaging research. For collective benefit, unlike other research modality that has a lot of research data, but no particular benefit delivered for indigenous or marginalized population, there is a general lack of local imaging data. This is mainly due to MRI being costly and centralized resources. However, the same outcome of lack of benefit delivered to specific groups still apply. For example, there is a deep learning-based tool to detect neurodegenerative diseases early, which is tuned for Caucasian and Asian population due to open databases being made available for training. This tool will not provide as accurate estimation for non-targeted population. For authority to control, the imaging research design consultation and involvement is quite lacking currently. Mainly because imaging is a highly specialized field and have been operating in isolation from community, where data owners often do not have ability to inform research questions and progress, and they kind of lose ability to track their data and what outcome their donation has contributed beyond the initial phase easily. For responsible imaging research, images of body have cultural importance in many cultures, and in order to respect that, it is difficult to open up and publish raw imaging data without careful consideration. And last, ethical treatment of data might not always align with FAIR principles natively, so we have to actively work on optimizing both parameters. We have identified many of these would be resolved from having a genuine ongoing relationship with the community, who are the data owners. To meet the FAIR principles better in imaging research, the need for a larger, The need for a larger database is clear. However, pulling raw data into a single database makes application of care principles difficult. To address this, MARTA has started to develop a federated analysis model with help from NeSI. This is based on the federated learning technique used for machine learning, where the individual weightings or results of local repositories are shared and aggregated for a global model without a centralized data set, literally performing data science without data collection. Adopting this theme, we plan to share data acquisition and processing pipelines that are made vendor-neutral and semi-automatic. For other imaging institutions to perform on their own data set using the same pipelines and methodology. This allows us to pull our data or the results together without sharing any sensitive raw data. And we can control the shareable outcomes to meet care principles. They can be communicated between institutions and published, allowing comparison to global data or local data, or to even to increase the sample size. This way, the analysis outcomes are naturally interoperable with minimal harmonization due to machine specification. Also, for any new data acquisition can be informed by the open acquisition parameter, which is not limited to just the imaging parameter, but to what demographic and other health metadata was collected for the research. Hopefully, this will reduce required sample size to detect the effect, as parameters can be more effectively controlled for across multiple datasets. A technical example of using a functional MRI processing pipeline we have worked on will be shared at tomorrow's session 5, jointly presented by Maxime from NZRSE and Josh from MARTA, if you're interested. In conjunction with the phase 1 of doing a federated analysis and sharing the pipelines, we're starting our work on an online portal to connect data owners and community with the researchers to facilitate operationalizing the care principles in imaging research better. This portal will build genuine relationship with data owners, allowing the community values to be incorporated in research to maximize collective benefit, and also facilitate easy data governance options for ethical data reuse and give authority to control to the data by data owners, which naturally makes the institution managing the data responsible and transparent about data use and reuse. Lastly, any scientific outcome tracking will be made easy to understand for the data owners. Without specialized knowledge will be an important aspect. Individual data owners and researchers of a project can have a secure login to the portal, and federated research results can feed in or not feed into, but fundamentally, they have access to information and minutes from all these upcoming and previous in-person and online engagement meetings primarily. For each data owners, either the individuals or a representative of a group, there will be a way to opt in and out of primary and secondary research easily, which will be communicated to the coordinating researcher directly and can be incorporated into doing our live research. Lastly, data owners will be able to see scientific outcome their data has contributed so far, presented in a way that is easily understandable for non-experts, which will not be limited to academic publications and outputs, but will include non-academic outcomes such as social media and news. We've been working on phase 1 actively this year, and we are about to initiate this work on the portal by the end of this year and upcoming. And if everything goes well, we look forward to reporting back in the near future. The whole MARTA research panel are very supportive of doing research the right way, which meets the fair and care principles. And however, I would like to thank the co-authors of the presentation for their mahi especially. And I would like to conclude my presentation with a proverb. Ehara takotoa ite takitahi, engari he toa takitini. Success is not the work of one, but the work of many. And we're just starting to build resources to make imaging research more fair and care. And we're looking for partners. If you are doing imaging research and is interested, or you have any other imaging research group who might be interested in our repository, we're happy to share what is available and build the repository and resources together. Namihi, is there any questions?
Thank you very much, Eryn. Just a reminder to the audience today, if you have some questions, we have a few minutes for questions. Do post them in the live Q&A. In the meantime, while we're waiting for that, I have a question for you, Eryn. I'm interested in this federated approach. So essentially, as I understand it, you have localized models being developed, and then the weights from those localized models are being shared, essentially being aggregated, if you like, into a centralized model. My question is, I wonder, are there any issues that you foresee around that could arise because of that federation? So, for example, if you have a lot of localized learning going on, but the data sets are very differently sized and they perhaps have their own biases around the community that they are representing, does the federated approach sort of raise a danger that you end up with biases carrying forward into the main model, or is that catered for in the federated approach?
So that's more of a federated learning model. So this is just on the analysis part. So our idea is to output a quantifiable output and perform the analysis step. And with those data, we can do learning approach using machine learning or other models.
Okay.
And basic data science can be performed on the quantifiable data stage.
Right.
Without
I see.
the worries on sample sizes and other things.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Just give it another minute or two. Anyone got any questions they'd like to ask? Very interesting research.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more questions, thank you very much, Eryn, and we'll move to our next speaker.
Kia ora.
Okay.
Thank you, Eryn. Thank you, Brent.
Next up, we have Eirian Perkins, who is going to talk to us about the bridging the gap between design and FAIR principles in software. Thank you, Eirian.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Eirian Perkins, taku ingoa, no America aho, ke New Zealand e-science infrastructure mahi aho. Hi everyone, my name's Eirian, and today I'll be sharing some of my learnings I've come across while contributing in a collaborative environment. I, along with my colleagues, have been involved in creating the Aotearoa Genomic Data Repository. I'm aware that much has been said about this resource previously, so I will only provide a brief introduction before going into the main points of my talk. The main goal of establishing the Aotearoa Genomic Data Repository was to provide a resource that enables both researchers and kaitiaki, or guardians, to fulfill their responsibilities regarding genomic data sets in which they have been involved in generating. I've illustrated some motivations with a series of basic questions. Are the data findable? How does this research benefit my community? Are the data accessible? Can other researchers use them? Is the right of kaitiaki-tonga or guardianship enabled? So, in other words, how can we bridge the gap between FAIR and CARE principles? FAIR is often misinterpreted as advocating for open data, where data are universally publicly accessible. But FAIR doesn't actually require data to be open, simply accessible. So, for example, through an application process. And the CARE principles, which could be summarized as Indigenous control of Indigenous data. I wanted to give a quote from the Global Indigenous Data Alliance. Quote, the current movement towards open data and open science does not fully engage with Indigenous people's rights and interests. So what we have here with AGDR is an attempt to bridge the gap, which I will illustrate by walking through the user journey. In terms of a data access request, the first step is for the researcher is to apply for access, click the button, describe the intended use of the data, and then the data request is reviewed by the AGDR team. The application will progress only if sufficient information is provided. From there, the request is sent to a Kaitiaki contact, and if appropriate, forward on to Manaaki Whenua, who then decide to grant access or not. From there, a decision is communicated to the applicant, and if it's successful, the researcher must agree to conditions of data access and may then download the data. I wanted to emphasize here that the data access request may be denied, therefore adhering to the authority to control principle. In terms of the data submission process, the first step again is to click submit data, then provide basic project information. The application is then reviewed by the AGDR technical team, and upon approval, again, approval is not guaranteed. The researcher is provided with a metadata spreadsheet, template for data ingest. Data transfer instructions are provided along with a project being created on the AGDR system. Any biocultural labels and notices are links from the local context project. I won't get to it here except to mention it. There's more information at the end of my presentation. And finally, a DOI is minted. So that's like the whole shebang for data submission process. But this is the portion of the process that I wanted to zero in on today and explore. So some commentary before diving in. One way to view technology is mainly as a human attribute, because in the end, everything technical is about people. AGDR, the Aotearoa Genomic Data Repository, was built using the Gen 3 software stack. Gen 3 was designed to support research on the scientific community by providing a data commons and other services. A data commons is a framework to collect, store, and manage data, as well as share data to create an interoperable resource for the research community. So to take a brief look at AGDR, here's the homepage. It summarizes available data. It shows the summary here, and then the submit data button is here, which I described earlier in the flowchart. Here's a view of the data exploration page. So data may be filtered by selecting options on the left-hand panel, and there's different views that will show different views of the data here, along with the ability to apply for access. There's also the project discovery page, where all projects in the AGDR are listed. Here is the project discovery page again with the project open. So once the researcher has identified a project of interest, they may click on it, opening this more detailed view. Of note, it includes the project DOI and the apply for access button. I also wanted to take a glimpse at the Gen 3 native data submission process. So this, I won't be showing you in this part the official AGDR data ingest process, but a view into what's supported out of the box, because again, it motivates the work that I will be presenting shortly. So there's a page where you may select the type of metadata you want to populate. Here I'm selecting an acknowledgement type, and then you may, it will then open a form, and you may fill out relevant fields and generate a JSON blob. It'll be more clear in a moment because maybe the text is a little bit small. But I wanted to point out here the submitter ID field. The intention of this is not easily understood by users and researchers. And although the Gen 3 data structure is by large fully customizable, some fields such as submitter ID cannot be changed. So then after I want to, so I can generate submission JSON form from that. It'll generate this JSON blob. If I submit it, I will receive basic feedback if the data are malformed. However, constructing JSON is not the usual approach researchers are accustomed to when collecting metadata for submission. TSV, tab separated value upload is also possible, but some of the conventions like asking for a unique identifier, here shown as the submitter ID, are not intuitive, and the description of these fields are not included in a TSV template. So to summarize, the native data submission is not so polished, and the process is unlike other data repository experiences. So we compared the native Gen 3 experience with alternative data repositories and had workshops to seek feedback from stakeholders in collaboration with Genomics Aotearoa. So briefly, we learned that researchers were more familiar with spreadsheet-based metadata ingest. Here, for example, is the NIH Sequence Read Archive, which supports spreadsheet-based metadata ingest. And here I have a little screenshot from Geome, the Genomic Observatory's metadata base, which does support a template generator per project and will automate validation of a filled-in spreadsheet. So from what I've presented, the question of how can we bridge the gap seems like a question of how can we make AGDR's user experience match alternative data repositories. That's partially true, but the question is a bit larger than that. Gen 3 is not only a technology stack, but also a collaborative community. Roughly every other month, there's a virtual Gen 3 forum for the community of developers, operators, sponsors, and users. We learn from each other and share tools. So when we think of improving the metadata upload process, we also think about how to benefit the wider community. This ties in with the FAIR data concepts of interoperability and reusability. In order to build a metadata validation tool, we must first understand what existing solutions are available. We reviewed code implementations of some existing systems. Although there is a lot of really great work done, code tends to be tightly coupled to the rest of the system. So for example, there might be logic on updating the user interface rather than solely validating the metadata. The UI, of course, from alternative platforms is not Gen 3, so it can't be reused here. Step 2 is to identify parts of the existing system we want to replicate. Gen 3 internally represents the data model as a directed acyclic graph. This is useful because it enables algorithmically walking the data structure. Existing validators have the concept of rules, which can be applied to instances of metadata objects. There's also some advanced features that would be great to have. So for example, a lookup terms from an ontology. This is not currently a requirement, but it is sensible to think about how that could be implemented before designing the software. Step 3 is to design software so that it's extensible and reusable. This is the crucial step, but it is easy to overlook. The question is, what design would allow us to preserve Gen 3's concept of graph structure, facilitate rule application, and enable sharing the tool back to the community? The last step in the process is implementation, sharing, and iterative refinement. So in terms of the crucial step, the design, I need to read in a spreadsheet. I need to read in a Gen 3 metadata structure. Again, this is more or less fully customizable. So this needs to be done generically. And then finally, I need to validate the spreadsheet based on the rules specified on the metadata structure. So what I have here is an example of a composite design pattern. And just to remind you, a composite design pattern is a group of objects that are treated the same way as a single instance of the same type of object. So this base class here in purple is composite. So we have a schema, which is a collection of nodes, and each node has a collection of properties. A spreadsheet can be represented by a template subclass. A Gen 3 data structure can be represented by a metadata subclass, and then output can be represented as a validator subclass. So just as a bit of a shout out, this is from the so-called Gang of Four software design patterns, which I encourage you to review often and to incorporate into your own projects. But the punchline is it's real simple. We have a schema node and a property, and I've shown the base class here, so you can view the abstract implementation. We can also view the design in terms of the components need to achieve its goals. So first, we have a spreadsheet template. What I have here, we need to parse the input. The spreadsheet template was designed by my colleague Jun He. Some commentary. Providing a spreadsheet template means that we can rename fields. So we don't need to display the sample ID. Submitter ID. It can be named more sensibly as sample ID here. I know it's a little bit small. It'll be more clear during my demonstration. We also need a dictionary parser. A dictionary is the term for a Gen 3 metadata structure, and that's represented by a series of YAML files, which are then rolled into large JSON blobs. And again, these are almost entirely fully customizable. Some parts of the structure are recursive in nature, so parsing the JSON blob requires lookup in different part of the file. It's not terrible, but it's also not trivial. And then I want to construct a graph representation as a fourth step. So how to construct this? There's a lot of code here. The most important part is in this box. I iterate over the metadata nodes, and then I connect nodes with parent-child relationships. And after this, the spreadsheet data can be converted into a graph structure. Finally, the data may be validated. This is straightforward when they're represented in a graph structure because the validation logic can be simplified. So a call to validate can operate on a node or a property level. To make this more concrete, if let's say I have a sample, some of its properties are latitude, longitude, and date collected. I can validate these properties, or I can check that these properties are valid, and I can also check that the samples are present in the spreadsheet input, so I can do it at a property and at a node level. And now, without further ado, I'll show you my demonstration. So if I open this, this is the same thing that I've shown from the screenshot. So this is an example of our template, which has been filled in. We have name of the project, some details about it, who's filled it in, affiliation, and we have some other metadata, for example, the samples. And so this one, there's no mistakes in it, and I can run the validator. It'll just take a moment. I don't know why it's hanging. It was like so much faster before I started the demo. And then I can show the report. It says all the nodes, whether they're okay or not. So I'll just remove that. And then one of the requirements is that the sample IDs or submitter IDs are unique identifiers. So if I change it so that I have two of the same identifiers, I can do the validation again and see what happens. And if I look at the output, oh, I didn't save it. Curse of the live demo. Let's do that again. And then I can see that this node for environmental metadata, it tells me it's not valid. Why the submitter ID has a duplicate submitter ID AP. Coming back here, I wanted to provide some conclusions from my talk. So fair data is not necessarily open data. It can interoperate with care principles and facilitate the authority to control. Technology is mainly a human attribute. In the end, everything is about people, and collective benefit can include the developer community. So please do consider this during the design phase of your software. I wanted to open this for Patai, and also a big thank you.
Thank you very much, Eryn. Very interesting talk. Again, to the audience, if you have questions, please post them into the Q&A. While we're waiting for that, I'll kick off with a question. So the title of your talk was about bridging the gap between software design and the FAIR principles. And these days, of course, software design, software development is increasingly agile, increasingly fast-paced. Things tend to work on the idea of continuous refactoring. But the sort of work you're doing there's a lot of complexity in that, and there's a lot of sort of deep considerations around extensibility and reusability. So I'm interested in what, during the development of this software, how agile was it versus actually you've got to sit down and nut all this stuff out in detail first?
That's a really good question. So I did show kind of a detailed design, but I would say that it is compatible with the agile development process because, so I guess what you're getting at is if I have a waterfall method, I do all the design up front, and then I spend some iterations like filling it in, and then I have the final product and I give it out, and it's either like good or it's not good. What I've done here that's compatible with the agile process is I've spent some time thinking about like what would be the most sensible way to implement this. And then what I've done is I've built a scaffold that I can have iterative improvement on top of. So I'm not stampeding towards the keyboard and then trying a bunch of things, seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work, and then trying to get everything to fit in with that. I'm building a backbone I'm building a design backbone, and then I can iterate based on that. So I have, let's say I have a node here, and I've thought about how can I implement this? And so I have like a base class that's specifically for our metadata structure. And then I can think about that in terms of, well, is there a way I can write some of the boilerplate code so that someone could come in and swap it out with something? And maybe I have an implementation that doesn't work great, or there's some improvement I need to make. I can swap it out. I can add another subclass. So I can learn as I'm going. And the main point is thinking clearly about simple design at the onset will enable me to have that agile development process. Let's see here. This is, I just closed, it's unfortunate, I closed, yeah. I have some commentary earlier in my slide deck. Let me see if I can find the commentary that I had. So I mentioned that when I was looking at Geom, one of the things that Geom does that's really powerful is their software will actually tie in into ontologies. So if you start typing in some term, it can look at supported ontologies and make suggestions for you, or something along those lines. And it would be really awesome to have a feature like that in this tool. Like, it's not currently coded, but if I think about it as like another little object or a class somewhere, maybe there's a way I can have it tie in. And if I'm like very clear about like how that might fit in, then that gives me the opportunity to implement it later. And notably, like I haven't done any work to support an ontology lookup, but if I have a cogent design as kind of a backbone, then that's something I could look into in the future.
Yep, thank you. So yes, so very much about thinking about the bigger picture without fleshing everything out.
Yeah, exactly.
Question from Tim. He says, thanks, Eirian. Wondering how your forms of validation that you can specify are. For example, can you check that two lists have elements that correspond in some way? And also how much attention has been paid to giving helpful error messages?
Yeah. So I guess the way I was thinking about it, I don't know if you've taken like compilers or done compilers or interpreters, but I was trying to think about it like that. I'm kind of thinking about the second part of the question first, which is if everything's a graph structure, then I can walk it. And so if the feedback isn't like super descriptive, so this is pretty basic, right? What this is actually doing is it's walking the graph structure and then it's giving output. And then based on feedback I have from my colleagues, I can make that more detailed, right? So that part I can iterate on because everything's kind of abstracted out. And then, sorry, the first part of the question, the general forms of validation I can specify. Can I check that two lists have elements that correspond in some way? That's actually how I implemented this duplicate check. I have a set, and then I check membership of that set, and if the element is already a member, then there's an error. The other question, the other forms of validation. So I talked about this in terms of a composite design. So I also have little rule objects. So I can continue like creating rules, and then when validate is called, it will recursively go down into that rule and check it. So right now, I think what I've implemented is like some regex checks. So you can specify in a Gen3 metadata structure. You can say like what a string should look like. So if it's a timestamp or if it's a latitude or longitude, like what form is acceptable. So I can check that.
Yep.
The main thing I'm doing right now, and this is like our very first version, is I'm checking that properties that are required. So these are properties. Organism is a node, and each of the columns is a property.
Yep.
If the sample ID is required, I'm checking if it's required.
Yep.
But again, I can create new rule objects and add them into each property node.
Right.
So it's a recursive structure.
Thank you, Eryn. We're actually getting a bunch of questions coming in now, but we've run out of time. So thank you very much for that. And I guess those questions might be able to be answered offline. So thank you very much, Eryn. And moving to the last talk in this session, I would now like to welcome Michael Karich and Nathalie Giraudon, who are going to talk about DevSecOps when creating bespoke software on NeSI.
Thank you, Brett. Appreciate that. Kia ora tatu, ko Pikes Peak te Munga, ko Rehoboth te Awa, no United States ahau, ko Karich toku whanau, ko Michael toku ingoa. Hello, I'm very new to New Zealand, working on my Maori, so appreciate and understand any flexibility as I try and learn the language. So, as I said, my name is Michael Karich. I am the Deputy CISO for NZRSE, as well as University of Auckland, and I'm here with Nathalie, our Product Engineering Lead, and we're going to talk a bit about how we've approached DevSecOps at NZRSE and how we're helping ourselves and our collaborators walk down a journey towards creating and operating research securely. So no presentation is complete without an agenda. So we've only got 15 minutes. We're going to start with security as a practice because it needs to be part of your daily activities. Then Nathalie is going to outline what some of those are that she's done within her team to help bring us forward. And then I'm going to bring it back together with how we're approaching security from a collaborative effort across NZRSE and our broader community. So as I said, security as a practice is where we're going to start, where you need to build that capability and maturity within your team. And that starts with purposeful meetings about security and where security is an agenda topic, putting it on and making it visible is how we start building that capability and maturity, is thinking about it, talking about it, having some sort of spotlight or torch placed on it. Make sure you have the appropriate tooling. That can be as simple as adding capability through tools such as GitHub, leveraging automated tools through VS Code, other things like that that Nathalie will go more in depth on as she shares her insights. And then training. So working with the teams to understand and to deliver appropriate training, because it's great to tell your developers how to do secure white space and character escaping, but that same set of tools probably isn't as useful for your administrative staff, but still need to be aware of how that impacts the organization. So I'm going to hand it over to Nathalie so she can share with you.
Thank you, Michael. I'm Nathalie, and I'm leading the collaboration and integration team at NeSI. And we have been working on two different products, the Recura Genomic Platforms and HDR that Eryn just presented just before, then it was really good. Both of these platforms are hosted on the NeSI flexible HPC cloud that my colleague June will present this afternoon. Then we wanted to present also some of the security practice part of the DevSecOps we have been using, and we cut them in 3 different areas. The first one will be regular task, then design consideration, and finally we'll talk about other activities that I think are very important. Thank you, Michael. Then if we start, first thing is secret management. As soon as you access the cloud, you get a key, you get lots of password. And if you have SSH access, more password, database, more password, then have a secret management is what we recommend. Also because it's really useful when you onboard and offboard people, part of your team, you know the password if they are leaving and you can still access. Then we are using GoPass in the team. It's open source, and we have a small team of 7 plus myself, and it's really good. But if we work with other team, we use Bitwarden, which is more configurable and easier for us. Also, the flexible HPC will also have access to Barbican later on, which is another tool that could be quite useful. The second thing to think of is SSL certificates. Yes, for if you want an encrypted front end and encrypted traffic, then think about your SSL certificate. If you don't want to bother too much, buy a 1-year certificate. We are using free certificates for HDR and Rakura. Then we have been using Cerbot and with NZRSE to generate them every 2 months because they have a validity of 3 months. Then it's really good. And we use Acme, the automatic configuration management environment for it. Then something to think of at your start, and it's quite useful to have that organized already. The third thing is think of your regular backups. It's very important. Also know what you back up. You don't want to back up your application and your data maybe together. Think, for example, for HDR, our data is very, very sensitive, like for Rakura, then we don't include the backup of the application with any of the data. They are totally separated. Think that they have to be backed up on a separate system. It's very important. Then for HDR, we use AWS S3 for backup, and we have 7 days of them. Then think about that in your system. Then think about second factor authentication. You have to enable second factor authentication. It's in 2 different places. One on your application. Then for Rakura, we have logins and we use Keycloak for it. And we have enabled second factor authentication for every user, but also in the tools you are using. As I say, we are using AWS S3, then we have second factor authentication there. It's at every level. Think security. Thank you, Michael. Then we are using continuous integration, continuous delivery tool for all our development. And GitLab is the main tool. It's easy. There are many other tools available, but we like it very much. What we like about GitLab is also it allows us to manage our pipeline better. And there are 2 tools that GitLab provide, the secret detection and the container scanning. Then secret detection allow us to check in our pipeline that none of our secrets are visible outside. And they are really secret. Then it's really good for us to know that. And the second one is container scanning, that is using Trivy and Gripe for vulnerability scanning. Also, we have added Zap for penetration scanning and knowing our risk. Then the big tip here is don't add them to the pipeline and forget about them and like, oh yeah, they're run, it's all good. No. You have to make sure that your pipeline fail. If there is any important vulnerabilities, we recommend the critical one and I1 if you can. And for risk, we recommend the I1, okay? It's very important. You need to look after them and make sure you act quite quickly on them afterwards. As I say, we try to focus on open source, and we like open source for many reasons, but it's a shared community. We know it's well maintained, and for us, we have this confidence about it. Thank you, Michael. Then we also, part of your daily routine, plan regular update of your packages, your library, everything you have. It's quite easy to forget. Then make a 6-month schedule, make sure it is planned, that you don't forget and that is not bumped out by many other things. It's so easy to have that. And finally is testing. Yes, no one likes it, but it is very useful. it's very important to do regression testing because you want to make sure you find your bug, that no one can exploit any of your bugs and enter some of your application functionality without you knowing about it and wanting. Then regression testing, you want to know your status of your software, and it's very important. We are also testing API, and we do not only do positive testing, but also negative testing, which is, okay, if I send this wrong information, what will happen? And we don't want to find holes. Eirian, that was before, find a very important bug when we were working on Rakura, when we were working with the University of Auckland, where one of the application, when we are sending too many data, was failing. Then think about also all of this negative testing that is very useful. I have put 2 tools here, but it's only for JavaScript. There are many other tools available. Thank you, Michael. Then the next point is about your design consideration, okay? They are broader than your daily task. Then if we go through the list of them, think over your boundary, control your boundaries, okay, of your application, of what you have defined. Firewalls, you want to make sure your content, if you have some content that you display, is secure. Then think about protection of your content, and there are some cool tools here like Cloudflare. We are using AWS CloudFront for EDR to make sure we are protected against denial of service. Then all of this is quite important. Encrypt everything, yes, very important. As I said, for Rakura, we are saving some very sensitive data on NeSI infrastructure. We encrypt them. They are separated from everything and they are encrypted. Make sure your interface between your system are encrypted too. Recently, we got a spam attack on one of our interface, and then we needed just to authenticate it, and then everything went back to normal. Then think about the security level on everything. A spam attack is not nice. Then, depending on what you are using, just VMs, Kubernetes, or anything else, think also about the security of them. It's a huge topic in itself, but for Kubernetes, just think about secrets and have them encrypted, and role-based access control, okay? Then all of this is some of the terms, and if you are using them, it's quite useful. Thank you, Michael. Then finally, just a few words on other activities that we do, and I'm very happy that Michael joined NeSI, is training. Yes, security is not set in stone, it changes, and quite a lot. Then we need regular training, and I put some information here, but have someone that knows security training you, and have a topic, and it's very important. Also, I was talking about these 2 applications, and Rakura Genomic Platform and HDR, and both have been through independent review from the security team at the University of Auckland, and very grateful about it. It has been like a big refresh, fresh eyes going on it, and for us was going through all the points, make sure that, yes, we were secured. About your privacy policy, is the data you are saving, is it right, and do you store it in a proper place? And it's all of these questions, then have people helping you. And on that, I will pass it back to Michael. Thank you.
If I remember to unmute myself. So as you work through all those tools and build that capability within your team, security, it's not a bubble. So you have to work together. There we go. Because security is the balance between protection and operations, and the most secure system is off, and the most open systems are often insecure. So you've got to find that balance. So it's a collaboration across your development teams, your infrastructure teams, and your governance organizations that you're responsible for reporting to find that balance on that risk level. Is you start to work through these things, build practices, procedures, and guidelines that are scoped to your service, your product, or your team. So as you start to implement maybe some of the things that Nathalie shared, just taking that first step is going to help you build those security practices. Ideally, you start building all 6 of them that Nathalie shared, you got to start somewhere. And often as you start creating these practices and procedures and guidelines, the hardest step is just picking what you're going to call them and your naming convention. Because once you start doing it, it actually becomes second nature. It's part of what you do to give it a security consideration. So flexible HPC, this is a plug for Jun's talk later today, because there are some big announcements coming in that. But alongside of that, we're taking a new collaborative and iterative effort to our security policy, posture, and practices by putting out our works on our FlexiDocs GitHub page, where you'll soon be able to see all the things that we're working on and provide us feedback and the changes we're making in this space. And we're improving our approach to security broadly by the launch of a new security policy that is available on our webpage. We welcome any and all input on that as we work towards empower and building maturity and capability in this research development space here in Aotearoa. So of course, last little bit is questions, and I wanted to put my email up here in case we run out of time and you would like to get in touch and have a more in-depth conversation about any of this.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Michael and Nathalie. Again, audience, please put your questions into the Q&A, and I will kick off with one or two of my own. So the first one is, you're talking about the obviously training, making sure that people understand things like secure coding and so forth. I would wonder, do you have sort of any way that you make sure that that happens across the organization? Do you have, for example, mandatory training and gates people have to go through, and or automation of checks for safe coding practices and things like that?
Yeah, so I'll jump in real quickly and then let Nathalie answer the second part. But yes, we have established annual compulsory training in the security space and are ironing out what that means for each team. But yes, we are treating it as compulsory so that we can continue and to advance our maturity into the future.
I will say yes, we have a regular technical meeting with the team, and security is one question or one topic that we have regularly, and we try to discuss this very regularly. But we want to bring more, I think, structure to it, and I think Michael is helping us with that.
Yep. So on one branch of my question, Maxime posted a question just about at the same time, thinking along similar lines. He's asking, can CI/CD be configured to refuse pushes that contain secrets, for example, such as passwords, so that they never land in GitLab?
This is a very good question. I do not know, but I can find out and I can come back with the answer of that. What we know is make sure that if we have passwords, at least with the secret detection, what we do is straight away, if it's clear that we have one, then we have to change it and change the code and make sure it doesn't happen anymore. That we do very often not, but we do, and we know that this. But I will search exactly for if on the pushes you can check for password. But what will happen is it will be in the pipeline. It will fail, but I'm not sure the push will be. Yeah, I don't think the push will not happen, but it will fail straight away.
Okay, thanks. Tim has asked a couple of questions. One that I don't understand the question, but hopefully you do. He asks if you do any fuzz testing of your APIs. I've never heard of fuzz testing.
In fact, I don't know either on that one. Then, it's why it's great about this, and I can search about that. We do a lot of testing, automatic testing on the API, but we do for sure, checking that they answer properly, that, as I said, negative testing, checking the codes. We do also a lot of robust, but I'm not sure about fast, but I will check that and see if it applies to API and come back to it.
Thanks. And another very interesting question. Scanning for secrets requires that the scanning software knows all the secrets.
Then GitLab, yes, GitLab will have a list of secrets that we use for the pipelines. You know, for example, we want to push things, and they are all, you can't see them, you know, and only a few people, which are the owner of a repo, can see them. But you need to put them because you need to deploy on the platform. Then you need the key to deploy on the platform, okay? Then you have to have that done. No, after that, you can make sure they are all hidden, and then it stays inside and it will not show you anything, but it will just say the name of this secret has been compromised.
Thank you very much. And that's the end of the session for today. Thank you all very, very much to all of our speakers for a brilliant session. And so now we're, I think, taking a lunch break, and we'll see you back in the afternoon sessions.